Hey guys! Tonight we are going to drift into the strange twilight of Greek myths where the gods handed down punishments so bizarre, so relentless, and so unfair that you'll start to feel your own bed feels like the softest gift in the universe. Imagine this, you're out in the wild mountains, the air smelling of pine and smoke, and there's a chained figure up on a crag of rock. He's stretched out, bound in iron, staring at the sky as if daring the stars to blink first. The wind is sharp, the sun is cruel, and, to be honest, you probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes in that place. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're watching from, and what time it is right now. I love seeing the little constellation of people who tune in. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are standing with Prometheus, the titan who once walked in the golden halls of Olympus, but decided mortals deserved more than the scraps of raw meat they were tossing on their fires. He stole flame, literal divine fire, from the hearth of the gods and carried it down, lighting human life forever. You feel the warmth at your fingertips, the first spark of cooked bread, melted bronze, glowing hearths in winter. That little act of generosity became the reason you're not gnawing raw squirrel right now. But the gods, Zeus especially, weren't thrilled about this cosmic charity project. So Prometheus ended up here, shackled against a jagged cliff in the Caucasus. The sky looms like a punishment of its own, endless blue, no shade. The horizon always taunting with freedom he can't touch. And every single day, like clockwork, a massive eagle comes swooping down. Wings flapping like heavy sails, talons scraping the stone. It digs in and rips at his liver. Yes, his liver. The ancient Greeks believed the liver was the seat of life itself, pulsing with vitality. So, naturally it became the go-to chew toy for divine justice. You watch Prometheus clench his jaw, his body convulsing, but he doesn't scream anymore. He's past the quirky part. Every night, the liver grows back. Full reset. Like the world's worst video game respawn point. You survive the day, only to wake up with the exact same problem, knowing the monster bird will show up again tomorrow, punctual as your alarm clock. Historians still argue whether the myth was originally a coded metaphor about the cycles of pain, and healing may be a faint recognition of how the human body regenerates after alcohol poisoning, since the liver is the one organ that can bounce back. Or maybe it was just the gods being especially petty, and while you stand here, noticing the chains clinking in the wind, you also remember that Prometheus had a brother Epimetheus who accepted Pandora and her infamous jar. That one decision filled the world with suffering, sickness, and mosquitoes. Prometheus saw that one coming, too, and tried to warn him. But apparently the family business was ignoring good advice. You might smirk at the thought. Imagine being cursed with foresight, but no one ever listens. Kind of like you predicting that traffic will be awful, but your friends insist on leaving late anyway. There's a strange tenderness in this endless punishment, though. Prometheus never gave up the location of a secret prophecy that could topple Zeus, in some versions. He held on to knowledge about a future child stronger than the sky god himself. The punishment, then, was both pain and pressure, daily torture combined with divine interrogation. Imagine being in an eternal escape room where the clue is hidden inside your own resolve. And, by the way, one mainstream fact the ancients connected to this tale, the Caucasus region, where Prometheus was chained, was also thought of as the edge of the known world. For Greeks mapping their cosmos, the punishment literally pinned him on the frontier, stuck where human imagination began to blur into myth. Modern archaeology even shows early myths traveled along those mountains, traded with tribes who probably never guessed their home would become shorthand for divine torture. But the fringe detail? Some scholars suggest that Prometheus' story influenced early Christian symbolism of suffering for humanity. His body stretched against stone, his pain endured for the sake of mortals. It all faintly echoes much later imagery of another figure, nailed to wood. You feel that eerie overlap, myth blending with religion, punishment becoming sacrifice. As the eagle's shadow glides across you, the sound of beating wings makes your stomach tense, even though you know it won't touch you. You step back, watching the sharp-beaked tear again, and you wonder, is this punishment crueler because it hurts or because it never ends? Eternity, after all, is hard for the human brain to wrap around. Your liver regenerating each night might sound like a neat superpower, until you realize the reset button is also your doom. Prometheus doesn't look at you. He doesn't need to. He stares past you, up toward Olympus, toward the sky itself, defiant even as feathers scatter in the wind. He knows one day, someone, maybe a wandering hero, will come with a blade sharp enough to break the chains. But tonight, tomorrow, and the next 100 years, it's just the mountain, the eagle, and the stubborn titan who thought humanity deserved a little spark. You step away from Prometheus Crag, the sound of wings fading behind you, and the path you follow winds down into a quiet valley. It's almost peaceful until you notice a man straining against a massive stone. He's sweaty, dusty, his tunic ripped into sad little strips, and he's pushing with every ounce of muscle he has. The boulder rolls upward, groaning like an old elevator. You think, maybe he's about to succeed, finally get it over the ridge. But then, right before he crests the hill, his foot slips. The rock shudders, trembles, and with a kind of comic inevitability, it rolls straight back down. He groans, wipes his brow, and trudges after it. Welcome to the eternal workout plan of Sisyphus. Sisyphus was a king, clever, crafty, and possibly the first guy you'd want on your trivia team. But he ticked off Zeus one too many times. He betrayed secrets of the gods, tricked Thanatos, the personification of death itself. And for a while, he even had death chained up so that no humans could die. You can imagine the backlog in the underworld. Ghosts waiting in line with little complaint tickets, wondering why nobody's processing their paperwork. It was clever, it was bold, and it was enough to put him on Zeus' permanent naughty list. So here's his punishment. He has to roll this enormous stone up the hill forever. But he never gets to finish the job. Every time he's close like 1 meter away from completion, the stone slips back, and he's got to start over. It's the world's cruelest almost. And while you watch him shuffle after it again, you realize the real punishment isn't just the back-breaking effort, it's the frustration. He knows exactly what's going to happen every single time, and yet he still has to go through the motions. Historians still argue whether the myth was meant to show cosmic justice punishing arrogance, or whether it was a metaphor for human existence itself. After all, life is full of repetitive tasks, laundry, dishes, emails, mowing the lawn. You finish one, only to start again tomorrow. Albert Camus, the French philosopher, even turned this into a famous essay, saying we must imagine Sisyphus happy. He argued that the trick is to find meaning in the repetition, to embrace the absurd. That's a nice intellectual spin, but if you ask me, Sisyphus looks pretty cranky right now. One mainstream fact about this story, the Greeks actually considered Sisyphus one of the craftiest mortals ever. He even tricked Persephone into letting him back into the world of the living, claiming he wasn't buried properly. He made it back to daylight, lived a little longer, and only got caught again later. It was like watching someone cheat death not once, but twice. No wonder the gods decided to lock him into a punishment where clever tricks don't matter anymore. And the quirky tidbit? Some later retellings say that every time Sisyphus bends down to push the rock again, the gods laugh. Imagine the entire divine pantheon sitting up on their clouds with a bowl of popcorn, watching him like it's the original sitcom rerun. The eternal cosmic joke. One guy versus one rock. The audience never changes, and the ending never surprises. As you follow Sisyphus up one more slope, you start to feel his shoulders trembling under the strain, his sandals slipping on loose gravel. The sun never sets here, it's always the same dull, exhausting brightness. His face drips with sweat, and he leans into the stone with a grunt that echoes around the valley. For one brief moment, you find yourself rooting for him. Just maybe this time he'll manage to tip it over. But no, the rock trembles, hesitates, and with a slow inevitability rolls back, brushing past him like an old friend. Down it goes, clattering against the hill until it rests exactly where it started. You catch Sisyphus' eye as he trudges after it again. There's no anger there anymore, just a sort of tired resignation, maybe even a smirk. He's been doing this longer than you can imagine. He knows the joke, and he knows the ending. The only thing left is to keep playing his part. You turn away, hearing the dull roll of stone against dirt behind you, the eternal soundtrack of a man whose cleverness bought him the loneliest treadmill in myth. You leave behind the crunch of stone and the endless sigh of a boulder sliding downhill, and you step into a place where the air smells fresh and cool, almost like a garden after rain. The ground is soft under your feet, grass sprinkled with little white blossoms, and a stream gurgles nearby. It feels peaceful at first glance until you see him, a tall, regal figure standing in the shallows, bending down again and again to scoop a drink of water. Every time his hands dip, the liquid slips away. The surface ripples, recedes, and leaves his palms empty. You hear the rasp in his throat, the crack of lips that never get relief. This is Tantalus, forever thirsty, forever hungry, forever denied. Tantalus wasn't just any mortal. He was a king, and a son of Zeus himself. You'd think being a demigod would earn you at least a little leeway with Olympus. But apparently the family discount didn't apply. He was invited to dine with the gods, a rare privilege, but instead of being grateful, he stole ambrosia and nectar, their food of immortality, and tried to share it with mortals back home. Sounds generous, right? Except he also committed some far darker crimes, betraying divine secrets, and in one especially grim version, serving up his own son Pelops in order to test whether the gods were all-knowing. Spoiler, they noticed Dot, so his punishment matches his crimes. Tantalus is surrounded by abundant school water at his feet, branches heavy with fruit dangling just above him. But every time he reaches, the gods snatch it away. Bend down and the stream dries out, the mud cracks, leaving him with empty hands. Stretch upward and the branches creak higher, the pears and apples just out of reach. Imagine living in a bakery where the cupcakes hover 1 inch beyond your tongue forever. That's his eternity. Historians still argue whether the myth was meant as a morality tale about hubris, reminding mortals never to test the gods, or whether it's a broader metaphor for human desire, always chasing things just beyond our grasp. Think of modern life, the latest phone, the perfect vacation, the job promotion always dangled above you. We chase, we reach, and often it slips away just when we think it's ours. A mainstream fact here. The very word tantalize comes from Tantalus. Every time you use it, you're echoing his endless torment. Language itself remembers the punishment, carrying it forward thousands of years every time someone complains about a cookie they can't quite grab from the top shelf. Dot and a quirky tidbit. In some fringe retellings, Tantalus wasn't alone in his punishment. The shade of his son Pelops supposedly forgave him, wandering nearby, while Tantalus kept straining for food and drink. Imagine the awkward silence, your resurrected kid pacing around while you, their parent, try to pluck ghost apples you'll never taste. Family therapy clearly wasn't a thing in the underworld. The scene around you is both serene and cruel. The water glimmers under the sun, fish darting playfully through the current. But it's useless to him. The fruit smells sweet and a breeze stirs the branches, just enough to brush his fingertips before pulling away. His throat makes a dry rasp, a sound that echoes louder than the trickling stream. You notice his eyes, once proud, now hollow with the knowledge that he'll never eat, never drink, never be satisfied. It isn't pain that punishes him most, but the endless cycle of hope followed by disappointment. You stand at the edge of the stream, tempted to reach down yourself. The water is clear, sparkling, so close you can see your reflection. You think maybe if you cup your hands, you'll manage to drink what he cannot. But the moment you lean forward, the ripples shimmer and the waterline drops away, laughing silently at you. Even as an observer, you're not immune to the rules here. You step back, throat suddenly dry, realizing the gods have extended their little joke in your direction just for a second. Tantalus doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. His movements tell the story, reaching, failing, again and again, like a puppet wound into an eternal dance. You leave him there, still stretching for fruit that will never touch his tongue. The soft gurgle of the river now sounding more like mockery than music. You drift farther along the dim pathways of the underworld, the cool garden scent of Tantalus fading behind you. when a sudden whoosh of hot air brushes your face. The sky above seems to flicker with orange streaks, and then you see him, a man strapped to a gigantic wheel, spinning through fire and wind. His arms are bound wide, his hair streaming like tangled rope, and every turn of the wheel scrapes his back against searing sparks. You feel your stomach lurch just watching, because this is Ixion, the unlucky soul punished for crimes that even the gods couldn't laugh off. Ixion had once been welcomed to Olympus, a guest at the divine table. That alone is a big deal. Imagine being invited to dinner with the most powerful beings in the cosmos. You'd probably remember to mind your manners. But Ixion, instead of gratitude, developed an inappropriate crush on Hera, Zeus' queen. He whispered his desire, tried to seduce her and Zeus rather than strike him down instantly. Set a trap. The king of the gods shaped a cloud into Hera's likeness, call it the original catfish profile. And Ixion fell for it. He embraced the cloud, and from that strange union came the race of centaurs, half human, half horse beings who forever carried the stain of his mistake. But Zeus wasn't done. For daring to lust after a goddess, Ixion was bound to a fiery, spinning wheel, cursed to rotate endlessly through the heavens or, in some versions, across the smoky skies of the underworld. You hear the crackle of fire as the wheel spins past, his body arching and snapping with every rotation. The punishment is simple, repetitive, but cruelly elegant. Motion without rest, heat without shade, pain without end. Historians still argue whether Ixion's tale was meant as a warning against arrogance, lust, or simply bad guest etiquette. Some scholars suggest it was a morality story about breaking hospitality laws, which the Greeks took seriously. After all, Zeus himself was protector of Xenia, the sacred bond between host and guest. And Ixion wasn't just a bad guest, he was the guest who tried to romance the hostess. If there's ever a mythological handbook of don'ts, his entry takes up a whole chapter. One mainstream fact worth noting: the wheel became a recurring symbol of divine justice in later myth and even medieval imagination. The wheel of fortune, spinning fate up and down, owes something to Ixion's blazing circle. His torment became a kind of cosmic metaphor for how quickly fortune turns. 1 minute rising, the next crashing, and here's a quirky tidbit in some fringe versions. The wheel wasn't just spinning randomly, it whirled across the skies as a visible warning. Some ancient storytellers claimed it created streaks of fire that mortals saw as comets or meteors, heavenly reminders of what happens when you step too far out of line. Imagine every shooting star being a little postcard from Ixion, screaming, "Don't hit on goddesses." You watch the wheel turn again, the iron spokes glowing red with heat, sparks flying as though it's grinding against invisible rails. Ixion's voice is hoarse, his cries blending into the whistle of wind, until you can't tell where the scream ends and the fire begins. And yet, in some twisted way, there's rhythm to it, like a macabre carnival ride that never ends. The wheel spins, the body arcs, the flames lick, and then it all starts over. For a moment, you wonder if he's dizzy. Can you even be dizzy when eternity has numbed every sense? His head lolls back as the wheel drags him upside down, then forward, then sideways, never pausing, never allowing even a second's relief. You catch his eye once as he rotates past. There's no pleading there anymore, just a kind of blank, stunned endurance, as if he's accepted that the spin is his universe now. The heat presses against your skin, your hair sticking slightly to your forehead. You take a step back from the wheel's rush, the gusts of burning air making your throat dry. Behind you, the shadows seem to beckon, as if reminding you that there are still more punished souls to see, each with their own nightmare loop. You give Ixion one last glance as his will blazes onward, disappearing into fire and smoke, only to reappear again seconds later, just as relentless. The fiery gusts from Ixion's spinning wheel fade into a quieter hum, like the dull buzz of a hive, and the path tilts toward a wide stone courtyard. At first, you think you're hearing the rush of a waterfall, but no, what you're hearing is water sloshing against clay, pouring, splashing, spilling. You step closer and see them, 50 women, each with a jar larger than herself, hauling buckets of water from a well. They move in weary unison, hips bent, arms trembling, each jar balanced on a shoulder. And yet, every time they pour the water into the great cistern, it vanishes. The jars are cracked, bottomless, cursed never to hold a drop. This is the punishment of the Danaids. The Danaids were the 50 daughters of King Daenors, married off to the 50 sons of his twin brother. But the marriages weren't born of love. In one of the grimmest wedding night twists in mythology, Daenors ordered his daughters to kill their husbands. 49 of them obeyed, slitting throats as the torches burned low, leaving only one sister, Hypomnestra, who spared her husband out of pity. The gods, or perhaps the Furies, decided that such mass betrayal demanded eternal penance. So here they are, still fetching water that never fills. Condemned to labor that mocks itself, you hear the jars scraping against stone, the steady shuffle of sandals, the splash of water spilling out again and again. It's maddening in its futility, almost worse than Sisyphus with his boulder. At least his rock stays put for a moment. For these women, there is no moment of completion, no chance to even see a surface rise in the cistern, just emptiness swallowing their effort every time. Historians still argue whether the punishment was symbolic of female disobedience, patriarchal anxiety about marriage, or simply a story about the pointlessness of betrayal. Some scholars even see the leaking jars as metaphors for wasted desire, fertility gone wrong, or the endless futility of human greed. It's one of those myths where the interpretations multiply like the daughters themselves. One mainstream fact in ancient Athens: the Danaid myth was reenacted in ritual dramas during the festival of Thesmophoria, a women's festival linked to fertility and agriculture. The cracked jars were symbols there, too, connecting the myth to the cycles of planting and harvest. Imagine that, using the story of eternal futility as a cultural reminder of renewal. And the quirky tidbit? Later folk tales whispered that Hypomnestra, the one daughter who refused to kill her husband, was given a light afterlife. While her sisters hauled water endlessly, she supposedly wandered free, her jar intact. Imagine the sibling tension at the eternal family reunion. 49 sisters huffing under leaking pots while one strolls by with a smug little smirk. You step among them, careful not to get splashed. One girl passes you, her hair damp, her face streaked with sweat and dust. She doesn't look at you. None of them do. Their gazes are fixed on the well, the jars the endless task. They don't even sigh anymore. When you listen closely, you realize the sound you thought was water rushing is actually the overlapping rhythm of 50 jars spilling, 50 feet shuffling, 50 lives stuck in the loop. You glance into the cistern yourself. It's wide and dark, its walls slick with moss, but there's no water inside. Just the echo of hollowness, swallowing every drop poured in. You think about modern life, in boxes that refill the second you clear them. Laundry baskets that never stay empty, meetings that multiply as soon as one ends. Suddenly, the Danaids feel uncomfortably relatable. The air is cool here, almost kind, which makes the futility sting more. There's no burning, no tearing of flesh, just the ache of knowing your work erases itself. You watch them repeat the cycle bucket, carry, spill, and you realize this is its own brand of torment. The gods didn't need fire or chains to punish them. Just futility, stretched across eternity. Dart as you step away. The rhythm continues behind you, steady as a heartbeat. Splash, slosh, scrape. A whole chorus of wasted effort echoing down the stone corridors of the underworld. The splashing chorus of the Danaids fades as you follow the corridor deeper into shadow. Here, the air feels strangely charged, almost like standing near a microphone that hums faintly even when nobody's speaking. Then you notice her slender, solemn, with a gaze that seems fixed on horizons nobody else can see. This is Cassandra, Princess of Troy, pacing restlessly with her hands outstretched as though trying to catch the words. Falling from her own lips, she whispers prophecies into the dark, truths that tremble with urgency, but nobody answers. Nobody believes her. That is her punishment, to always be right and to never be heard. Cassandra's gift came from Apollo. He admired her beauty and offered her the power of prophecy, promising she would see clearly what others could not. She accepted, but when he demanded her affection in return, she refused. And Apollo, being the god of light, truth, and apparently fragile pride, didn't revoke the gift. Instead, he cursed it. From that moment on, Cassandra could still predict the future, but her warnings would always be dismissed, mocked, or ignored. You hear her voice echo through the chamber, words you can't quite make out, almost like a faint radio signal. If you lean closer, the phrases sharpen, warnings about fire, about wooden horses, about betrayal at night, and you realize you're hearing fragments of her most famous visions, the fall of Troy, the flames consuming her homeland while her people laughed off her pleas. Imagine the torment, seeing disaster hours before it happens, and being brushed aside as melodramatic. It's like yelling iceberg on the Titanic, only to have the captain pat your head and tell you to relax. Historians still argue whether the Cassandra story was meant as a critique of disbelief, warning societies not to ignore their visionaries, or as a metaphor for the loneliness of women's voices in patriarchal cultures. Some even see her as an ancient archetype of ignored truth-tellers, people whose insight is mocked until it's too late. And well, human history has plenty of those. A mainstream fact, Cassandra's name became an enduring metaphor even today. A Cassandra is someone whose accurate warnings are ignored until hindsight proves them right. Economists, climate scientists, whistleblowers all carry her shadow when they speak truths that go unheeded. And a quirky tidbit, some later traditions claimed that Cassandra, after the fall of Troy, clung desperately to a small wooden statue of Athena, hoping the goddess would protect her. But Athena turned away, furious at earlier insults, leaving Cassandra betrayed by even the one deity she thought might listen. Imagine the cosmic irony, ignored by mortals and abandoned by gods. You watch Cassandra turn sharply, her hair flying around her face, eyes wide with the weight of visions pouring in. She tries to speak again, her voice soft but insistent, telling of a city burning, walls crashing, children wailing. Her words send a chill through you, because you know she's right. But the punishment isn't about being wrong, it's about being right in a world determined not to care. Her lips tremble into silence, and for a heartbeat she looks directly at you. You want to nod, to tell her you hear, you believe, that her words matter. But before you can, she whirls away again, muttering toward the empty stone walls. Already trapped in the next vision, you realize she doesn't even expect acknowledgement anymore. That's the cruelest twist. She knows the disbelief is baked into the curse. As you back away, her voice follows you down the hall, threads of prophecy weaving through the dark. It's not the shriek of someone desperate to be heard, it's the resigned murmur of someone who knows the ending, who was always known, and who will still be ignored no matter how often she speaks. The murmurs of Cassandra fade behind you, her prophecies dissolving into echoes you can't quite carry. The path bends sharply, and suddenly the air feels damp and mossy, the way forests smell after rain. You step into a clearing where sunlight filters in soft shafts, and the stillness is almost perfect. Then you notice a man stumbling through the underbrush, panting, his bow forgotten at his side. His eyes are wide, not with triumph but with terror, and you hear the rustle of paws, the growl of eager throats. This is Actaeon, and his punishment is to become prey for his own hounds. The story begins with a mistake, though mistake feels too small a word. Actaeon was a skilled hunter, famous for roaming the woods with his pack of 50 dogs. But one day, he wandered into a hidden glade where Artemis, goddess of the hunt, bathed in a silver pool with her nymphs. Mortals weren't supposed to see such divine privacy. He stumbled in, froze at the sight, and for that brief intrusion his life was rewritten. Artemis, furious, didn't scream or strike him down with an arrow. Instead, she whispered a curse. Actaeon's body shuddered, his skin prickling as for sprouted, antlers pushing out from his skull. He fell forward on hooves where his hands used to be. You watch as he stumbles again, throat caught between human cry and stag's bellow. His dogs, confused at first, sniff the air. Then instinct kicks in. They charge. The punishment isn't that Actaeon dies, it's that he dies hunted by the very creatures he trained, loved and trusted. Their barks echo through the clearing, excited, relentless, until they close in. Historians still argue whether the story was meant as a warning about violating sacred spaces, or a metaphor for the thin line between hunter and hunted. Some scholars see in it a lesson about hubris, others about the randomness of fate. One wrong step into the wrong pool, and your life is over. A mainstream fact, ancient Greek art often depicted Actaeon mid-transformation, antlers sprouting while his dogs lunged. These images weren't just storytelling, they were reminders of how fragile the line between man and beast could be. Even today, fragments of painted pottery capture his terrified expression as he realizes what's happening. And the quirky tidbit? Later medieval retellings turned Actaeon into a kind of cautionary tale. For wandering eyes, basically the ancient "don't be a peeping Tom." Imagine parents telling their kids, "behave," or "Artemis will turn you into a deer and let your pets handle the rest." You see the pack circle him now, eyes flashing, fur bristling. Actaeon tries to shout their names: Argus, Ethon, Melampus, but the words twist into guttural growls. The dogs don't recognize his voice anymore. They leap, teeth flashing, jaws snapping, tearing into the stag he's become. And though you flinch, there's no gore here. Just the sickening knowledge that betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from those you love. The forest stills once more after the chaos. The dogs settle, panting, tails wagging, unaware they've destroyed their own master. Artemis watches silently from the pool's edge, her bow slung casually over her shoulder. Her eyes are cold, not vengeful, simply detached. To her, justice has been served. You stand at the edge of the clearing, the damp moss soft under your feet, listening to the panting dogs as they lick their paws. The punishment lingers not in the violence itself, but in the horror of recognition lost, the master turned into prey. The loyalty of companions erased in an instant dot as you turn away. The shafts of sunlight dim, and the forest closes in again. The silence that follows feels heavier than before, as though the trees themselves remember the lesson sometimes. You don't survive the mistake of looking where you shouldn't. The forest air grows cooler as you slip away from the clearing where Actaeon's cries once echoed. Moss gives way to stone, and soon you find yourself in a quiet hall, lit not by torches, but by a strange silver glow that seems to rise out of the walls themselves. At the center of the chamber sits a loom, massive, polished, humming faintly with threads that glitter like strands of moonlight. A woman is bent over it, fingers flying, shuttle darting back and forth. Her movements are too quick, too precise, almost mechanical. This is Arachne, cursed to weave forever. Before the punishment, she was mortal and extraordinary weaver from Lydia. Her tapestries were so beautiful that whispers spread she might rival Athena herself. And because the gods hated rivals the way cats hate baths, Athena descended in disguise. Posing as an old woman, she warned Arachne to show humility, to acknowledge the goddess' superiority. But Arachne laughed. She didn't just refuse, she challenged Athena outright to a contest. Winner takes glory. So they set their looms side by side. Athena wove scenes of divine triumph, gods in glory, mortals punished, Olympus shining above. Arachne, daring beyond belief, wove the opposite scenes of the gods' flaws and crimes, Zeus sneaking into bedrooms in animal forms, Apollo chasing unwilling nymphs, Poseidon sulking in defeat. Her work was flawless, each thread glowing with skill so precise it mocked the goddess herself. Athena was furious. Not only had the mortal matched her craft, she had told the truth in thread. In rage, Athena struck Arachne's tapestry, tearing it apart. Arachne, devastated, tried to end her life in despair. But instead of letting her die, Athena transformed her, shrinking her body, stretching her fingers into legs, binding her destiny to the loom forever. From that day forward, Arachne spun webs as a spider, weaving endlessly. Never able to stop, you watch her now, fingers darting with unnatural speed, threads wrapping and crossing until patterns shimmer in the air. The punishment isn't pain, it's obsession. She creates but never finishes. Each design dissolves before it's complete, threads unraveling just as her shuttle reaches the end. It's like writing an essay only to have your computer crash at the last sentence every single time. Eternity is a glitch. Historians still argue whether Arachne's story was meant as a lesson in humility, or a quiet critique of the gods' arrogance. Was it blasphemy to depict their flaws, or bravery to expose them? The debate lingers, just as her threads linger, suspended, half-finished. A mainstream fact, The word arachnid, used today for spiders, comes directly from her name. Every time you swat a web from your porch, you're brushing against a fragment of her myth. And a quirky tidbit? In some ancient retellings, Arachne's descendants, the spiders themselves, were said to whisper curses under their breath, while spinning, tiny threads carrying echoes of their ancestress's defiance. So the next time you hear the faint scratch of a spider weaving in the corner, you might imagine it muttering about unfair judges in rigged contests. You lean closer to the loom. The threads look delicate, yet when you brush a finger against one, it hums like a taut string on a harp. Arachne doesn't look up, doesn't even notice you. Her eyes are fixed on the shimmering patterns, her face expressionless. She isn't free to stop. Creation is both her gift and her punishment. The room grows warmer, the silver glow intensifying until you can barely keep your eyes open. You back away slowly, leaving her hunched over the loom, weaving a tapestry that will never be seen, never be finished, never be free from unraveling. The hum of threads follows you out, soft, insistent, like a lullaby with no ending. The silver hum of Arachne's threads lingers behind you like a vibration in your bones. But soon it fades into stillness. The path ahead opens onto a barren hillside where the air feels brittle, the kind of dryness that cracks your lips. At the summit, a lone figure kneels in eternal grief. Her back is bent, her face streaked with stone tears, and her eyes stare outward, fixed forever on something only she can see. This is Niobe, a queen whose pride cost her everything until sorrow itself turned her to rock. Niobe had once lived in splendor as the queen of Thebes. She was rich, radiant, and, most importantly in her mind, the mother of many children. The number varies in the old stories, sometimes 12, sometimes 14, but always more than the goddess Leto, who had only two, Apollo and Artemis. During a festival in Leto's honor, Niobe couldn't help herself. She mocked the goddess, boasting that she was far superior because she had so many children. Why worship a mother of two when you could admire a mother of 12? Of course, insults against goddesses don't vanish into the air. They cut deep, and they invite retaliation. Leto, furious, sent her divine children to deliver punishment. Apollo and Artemis descended with bows in hand, their arrows flashing like streaks of sunlight. One by one, they struck Niobe's children down. The palace that had been filled with laughter and noise echoed with silence. Pierced only by Niobe's screams, she clutched her youngest as the arrows flew, begging for mercy. But the gods showed none. You stand near her now and see the aftermath frozen in myth, Niobe kneeling, arms still outstretched for children who are no longer there. Her skin has hardened, pale veins of stone running across it. Her tears drip down, but they never dry. They turn to little rivulets that stream along the hillside, feeding the grass below. Her punishment is not fire, not chains, not futile labor, it's grief made permanent. A sorrow so heavy it petrified her soul. Historians still argue whether the tale was meant as a moral about hubris never boast against the gods or a meditation on human grief, showing how pride and loss intertwine until nothing is left but silence. Some even suggest the myth was linked to natural landmarks. Ancient travelers pointed to a particular rock formation in Turkey that resembled a weeping woman, claiming it was Niobe herself, still mourning. One mainstream fact, the phrase "the tears of Niobe" became a poetic symbol in later Greek and Roman literature, a shorthand for endless mourning. Poets used her name whenever they wanted to capture grief that no time could heal. And the quirky tidbit? In one obscure version, some of Niobe's children were spared, not all were killed. They lived quietly, overshadowed by her curse, and she continued to mourn so loudly that even her surviving children felt erased by her endless tears. It's the mythological equivalent of a parent who only ever talks about the kids who moved away. Leaving the rest awkwardly ignored at family dinners, you move closer, and the air grows cooler around her stone body. Her face is streaked with permanent tears, her lips parted as though still caught in a sob. The grass beneath her shimmers faintly from the trickling water, the eternal reminder of her sorrow. You reach out a hand, and the stone is cold to the touch, smoother than it should be. Polished by centuries of invisible crying, Niobe doesn't look at you, doesn't speak. She's not even fully here anymore. The punishment has hollowed her, left only the posture of grief locked in place. You back away, and as you do, the hillside seems to sigh with the sound of running water. Her tears, even in stone, still carve their way downward, reminding every passerby that pride can be punished not with fire or chains, but with the kind of loss that never ends. The hillside of Niobe's grief recedes behind you, the trickle of stone tears fading into silence. The air grows sharper, colder, and then you feel the weight of another presence, this time not sorrowful, but wrathful. You step into a cavern lit by an eerie green glow, as though the walls themselves ooze venom. At the center stands a figure who once was dazzlingly beautiful. Her hair gleams dark, her skin pale as marble. But when she lifts her head, you see them, serpents writhing where her curls should be, tongues flickering, scales glistening. This is Medusa, punished not with chains or futility, but with a face so cursed that one glance turns life into stone. Before she was a monster, Medusa was mortal, a priestess in Athena's temple. Her beauty was the kind that drew whispers, hair like river currents, eyes that gleamed like polished glass. But beauty in Greek myth was rarely a blessing, it was more like a curse waiting to happen. Poseidon noticed her, lusted after her, and in one version of the tale, he forced himself upon her right there in Athena's sanctuary. Athena, furious not at her uncle, but at the violation of her temple, punished Medusa instead. She twisted the girl's hair into snakes, her gaze into a weapon of stone, her beauty into terror. It was divine victim blaming at its most brutal. You watch as Medusa sits in the cavern, head bent low, avoiding her own reflection. She no longer cries. She knows the tears would only scare her further if she saw them mirrored in stone. Around her, half-finished statues of men littered the ground, heroes, hunters, wanderers who thought they could defeat her. Their faces are frozen in surprise, some mid-shout, others mid-swing, captured forever in that last instant of recognition. Historians still argue whether Medusa was meant to embody pure monstrosity, a warning against female pride, or a tragic symbol of injustice. Some modern scholars read her as a survivor punished for another's crime, forced into isolation by a society that blamed her for what was done to her. And when you see her shoulders hunch, hear the quiet hiss of her serpents, that interpretation feels painfully true. One mainstream fact, the image of Medusa's head, the asterisk, Gorgonian asterisk, became a common symbol in Greek art, often placed on shields, temples, or coins as a protective emblem. The very face that destroyed men was used to ward off evil. She was feared but also revered, and a quirky tidbit, in fringe folklore, some people believed the snakes in her hair had distinct personalities, each with its own hiss, each whispering secrets into her ears. Imagine trying to sleep with 10 little reptilian roommates arguing on your scalp all night. That's a punishment in itself. You take another step into the cavern, careful not to meet her eyes. Even second-person narration doesn't protect you from petrification. Medusa senses you anyway. The snakes lift their heads, tongues tasting the air, and she raises her chin just slightly. For a moment, you catch the shimmer of her gaze reflected in a puddle on the floor, an echo of her power. But you turn away quickly, heart hammering. The cavern smells faintly of damp stone and iron. The statues around you lean like silent witnesses, their expressions frozen in horror. One hand reaches toward you, forever outstretched, the fingers chipped but still desperate. You wonder who he was, a soldier, a farmer, just some unlucky traveler. The punishment spreads outward, touching not only Medusa but everyone who stumbles into her orbit. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. Her silence is heavy enough, her presence loud enough. The gods gave her no escape, no reprieve. Her punishment is her existence, a body twisted into weaponry, a life stripped of companionship, a face that makes her unapproachable dot as you turn to leave the cavern. You hear the faintest hiss trailing you, almost like a whisper, not threatening, but resigned. It's the sound of someone who never asked to be feared, trapped in a curse spun out of divine arrogance. Outside, the air feels lighter, but you carry with you the weight of a gaze you dared not meet. The cavern's damp chill clings to you as you walk away from Medusa's lair. The path narrows, the air thinning until every breath feels like a whisper. And then you hear it, a faint echo, soft at first, then sharper, like your own words bouncing back at you with a delay. You step into a shadowed glen, where the rocks rise high and the trees press close. A voice drifts through the leaves, repeating your footsteps, your sighs, your murmurs. This is Echo, once a mountain nymph, now nothing but a voice caught in the cracks of stone. Echo's story is less violent than some, but no less cruel. She was once bright and playful, with a tongue quick enough to distract even Hera herself. In fact, that was a downfall. When Zeus wandered off chasing his usual escapades, Echo would chat with Hera to cover his tracks. Hera, realizing she'd been duped, punished her not with fire or death, but with silence twisted into mockery. Echo could no longer speak freely. She could only repeat the last words spoken to her, never able to express her own thoughts. Never able to start a conversation again, you stand still, testing the punishment. You whisper, "Hello." From the rocks comes hello. You murmur, "Can you hear me?" The leaves shiver and return, "Hear me." It's eerie at first, then strangely heartbreaking. She can't form her own words anymore. She's trapped in endless mimicry, her thoughts sealed away inside, only able to bounce back what others choose to say. Historians still argue whether Echo's tale was a commentary on women's voices, being silenced in a patriarchal world, or whether it was simply a mythic explanation for the natural phenomenon of sound bouncing in mountains. Maybe it's both science and social commentary tangled together in one voice. A mainstream fact, the Latin poet Ovid made Echo's story inseparable from that of Narcissus, the boy who fell in love with his own reflection. Echo adored him, but when she tried to express herself, she could only echo his words. When he said, "I love you," she repeated, "Love you," but he rejected her anyway. Her body withered, her form faded until only her voice remained, scattered among rocks and valleys. And here's the quirky tidbit. Some later storytellers claimed Echo's voice could change tone to match any speaker, so if a king shouted, she boomed. If a child whispered, she sang sweetly. Imagine being cursed not only to repeat, but to become a perfect impressionist of everyone else while losing your own identity. It's divine punishment turned into cosmic ventriloquism. The glen around you hums with her presence. You can't see her, but you feel her. Every crunch of gravel under your foot repeats a second later. Every sigh bounces back, a softer echo, like someone trailing behind you with no body. And it dawns on you, Echo's punishment isn't only silence, it's loneliness. You can't talk asterisk with asterisk her. You can only talk asterisk at asterisk her. Communication stripped down to repetition, connection broken at its root. You whisper one more phrase, almost on impulse, "I believe you." The rocks answer, "Believe you," and you can almost imagine, for a heartbeat, that she means it, that she has seized the echo for herself, twisted it into her own message. But no, the sound fades and the forest is quiet again, the punishment intact. You turn to leave, and the last thing you hear is your own footsteps multiplied, a chorus of shadows trailing you down the path. Echo follows, not because she wants to, but because she must. Her voice chained to every sound you make. The sound of your own footsteps bouncing back from Echo's glen fades into silence, leaving you oddly self-conscious. You tread carefully now, as though any sound you make might return to haunt you. The path tilts downward, and soon you're walking into a cool tunnel that smells of damp stone and faintly of smoke. In the distance, a pale glow flickers torches lining the walls of a cavern that feels more like a crypt. And there, pacing the floor, is a man with a lyre strapped to his back, his shoulders tense, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. This is Orpheus, musician, lover, and mourner, trapped not in chains, but in the cruel geometry of a single forbidden glance. Orpheus was the kind of artist who could make rivers pause mid-flow. Trees lean closer, and wild beasts sit in perfect stillness just to hear him play. His music had the kind of power people now imagine finding in a playlist that cures every mood. But when his beloved Eurydice died from a snake bite, Orpheus wasn't content to weep above ground. He took his lyre and marched straight into the underworld, strumming melodies so haunting even Hades paused to listen. His songs weren't just notes. They were grief given shape, love spun into sound. And somehow, they worked. The Lord of the Dead agreed to release Eurydice on one condition. You feel the tension as Orpheus walks before you. The condition was simple yet impossible. Lead Eurydice out. But don't look back until both of you are fully in the light. No matter how much he longed to see her, no matter how strong the urge, his eyes had to stay fixed ahead. One backward glance and she'd be lost forever. You trail behind him, hearing the faintest shuffle of Eurydice's steps in the darkness. She's there but unseen, and you feel Orpheus' doubt coil tighter with every step. Is she really following? Did Hades trick him? The silence grows unbearable. His hands twitch. The torches flicker. His neck stiffens under the weight of temptation. And then, at the very edge of daylight, he turns. Just a flick of the eyes, a fraction of a second. She's there pale, lovely, reaching out, but in that same instant, she dissolves like mist, pulled back into the dark with a sigh so soft it barely sounds human. Historians still argue whether this myth was meant to highlight the fragility of trust, the inevitability of loss, or the futility of challenging death itself. Some see Orpheus as a symbol of the artist, doomed to chase beauty that always slips away. Others think it's a story about impatience that sometimes the hardest discipline is simply to wait. One mainstream fact, Orpheus myth inspired countless works of art, from Roman mosaics to Renaissance operas. His backward glance became one of the most painted, sung, and staged moments in Western history. That one motion, a single look, echoed for centuries as the ultimate symbol of tragic love. And here's the quirky tidbit in some obscure versions. Orpheus didn't just look back because of doubt. He turned because he thought he heard Eurydice trip, as though she caught her foot on a stone. That tiny, very human instinct to check on someone you love sealed their fate. A punishment born not of arrogance, but of tenderness. You watch Orpheus sink to his knees, clutching his lyre as though it might rewind time. He strums a few strings, the notes trembling, but they no longer open doors. The underworld doesn't respond. His gift still works, but its magic has been spent on a bargain he couldn't quite keep. His punishment isn't endless labor or chains or hunger, it's memory. He saw her, lost her, and must replay that moment forever in his mind. As you step back from the cavern, you feel the weight of his silence pressing in. Behind you, he strums again, a melody so soft it sounds like a lullaby, but one that never soothes him, only circles him back to regret. The forbidden glance echoes long after the torches fade. The last soft strains of Orpheus' lyre dissolve into the stone, leaving you walking in silence once more. The tunnel bends and widens until you emerge into a rocky slope under a pale twilight sky. At first it feels calm, just a hillside dotted with thorns and vines. But then you hear a strange rustling, a sound that builds into snapping branches and trampling feet. A crowd presses forward, faces flushed, eyes wild, hair tangled with ivy leaves. They chant in rhythm, their voices rising higher and higher. And in the middle of it all, dragged against his will, is Pentheus, the king who mocked Dionysus and earned the kind of punishment that feels more like theater than justice. Pentheus, ruler of Thebes, wasn't a fan of the new cult spreading through his city. Dionysus, god of wine, ecstasy, and unbuttoned rules, had gathered followers who danced all night on mountaintops, drinking and whirling until the world itself felt dizzy. Pentheus, stiff-backed and rational, called it chaos, indecency, madness. He swore to stamp it out, but Dionysus didn't argue. He just smiled that sly, knowing smile and lured Pentheus into a trap. You watch as Dionysus convinces Pentheus to disguise himself as a woman, yes, a king in women's clothes, so he can sneak into the Bacchic rituals and spy. Pentheus, blinded by curiosity and pride, agrees. He tiptoes among the worshippers, thinking himself clever, unaware he's being led into his own undoing. The crowd, frenzied with divine ecstasy, mistakes him for prey. They seize him, their chants rising into shrieks. And then the punishment unfolds with brutal clarity, torn limb from limb, not by strangers, but by the very women of his city, his own mother and aunts. Intoxicated by Dionysus' madness, leading the charge, you hear their voices now, shrill with fervor, calling him a lion, a beast that must be destroyed. Pentheus screams, but his words dissolve into the frenzy. They don't see their king. They see an animal conjured by Dionysus' spell, and so his punishment is not just death, but humiliation mocked, disguised, torn apart by the people he thought he ruled. Historians still argue whether this myth was a warning about the dangers of resisting new religious cults, or a moral about arrogance and blindness to the power of ecstasy. Some see it as Euripides' way of dramatizing the unstoppable force of Dionysus. Resist him, and you will be consumed. Body and soul. One mainstream fact. The story of Pentheus is preserved in Euripides' tragedy the Bacchae*, one of the most powerful plays to survive from ancient Greece. Audiences in Athens would have sat under open skies, watching the king's downfall unfold with eerie inevitability, maybe sipping wine themselves as they reflected on the god's reach. And a quirky tidbit? In some fringe versions, Pentheus' disguise as a woman was so convincing that even he began to lose track of himself, giggling and stumbling in the dresses, briefly swept up in the madness before the fatal attack. Imagine the stern king momentarily twirling like a tipsy party guest. Before being dragged to his doom, you stand on the hillside now, the dust rising under stomping feet, the air thick with the smell of crushed grapes and sweat. Pentheus' cries echo once, then vanish under the frenzy of the crowd. The worshippers collapse into laughter and exhaustion, their frenzy spent, their hands stained. Dionysus watches calmly from the shadows, no smile this time. Only the cool satisfaction of a god whose power has been proven. As you step back, the hillside grows still again, vines swaying gently as if nothing had happened. Yet the echo of that chant lingers in your ears, reminding you that sometimes the cruelest punishment isn't isolation or futility, it's being unmade by your own people, under the spell of a god you refuse to honor. The hillside of frenzied chants fades into silence as you walk on, the dust settling at your heels. Soon, the path opens into a grove where the air feels unnaturally still. The trees here grow tall and straight, their bark pale under the glow of a high, indifferent moon. At the center of the grove, tied to a tree with rawhide straps, hangs a satyr, his face twisted in agony, his skin flayed open in long red streaks. This is Marsyas, the musician who challenged Apollo, and whose punishment turned music itself into torment. Marsyas had once been a simple satyr, roaming with pipes in hand. He found a flute lying on the ground, abandoned by Athena, who had invented it but tossed it aside after realizing the instrument puffed out her cheeks. In an unflattering way, Marsyas picked it up, blew a note, and to his delight, it sang with more beauty than anything he had ever known. The flute gave him skill, confidence, and daring to declare himself a rival of Apollo, the god of music. You can almost hear the challenge as Marsyas lifts the flute to his lips in memory, his fingers trembling even now. The notes are mournful, thin, but still haunting. Apollo had agreed to the contest, lyre against flute, and the muses themselves were the judges. At first, Marsyas held his own, his melodies wild and rich, the kind that made your pulse quicken. But Apollo, always competitive, shifted the rules. He demanded that each play upside down, and of course with his stringed lyre. Apollo managed easily. Marsyas with his flute could not. The god's smug smile sealed the verdict, and the punishment came swiftly. Apollo flayed him alive, stripped the skin from his body and nailed it to a tree, leaving the satyr to writhe exposed, every nerve screaming forever. You can hear him now, a faint, high-pitched whistle as the night wind slips through the stretched skin. The grove itself mourns him, the trees shiver, the leaves drip sap like tears. His punishment became part of the land, the music of agony woven into the very air. Historians still argue whether the myth is about hubris mortals daring to challenge gods, or about the dangerous lure of artistic pride. Was Marsyas wrong to try, or was Apollo simply cruel in proving himself superior? Ancient commentators debated whether this was justice or divine jealousy taken to its sharpest edge. One mainstream fact, in the region of Phrygia where Marsyas was said to have lived, a river bore his name. Locals claimed it flowed from his tears or, in darker versions, from his blood. To them, the myth wasn't just a story. It was geography itself, landscape shaped by punishment. And a quirky tidbit, later folklore claimed that Marsia's skin, once nailed to the tree, inflated with the wind like a bag. When breezes passed through, it whistled faintly, as if the satyr still tried to play his flute from beyond death. Imagine stumbling through the woods at night, hearing a thin, ghostly tune drifting from what looks like a stretched leather sack. Sleep tight. You step closer to the tree and see Marsia's eyes roll toward you. He doesn't plead he can't. His mouth is twisted in a permanent grimace, caught between scream and silence. The straps creak as he shifts, but he isn't going anywhere. His punishment is to remain, body peeled open, the symbol of what happens when mortals overreach. The wind sighs again, and for a moment you swear the notes align into a melody, faint but haunting, as though he still plays in defiance. Even now, you turn away, the air pressing cold against your arms, the phantom song trailing you like an unfinished tune. The grove of Marsias lingers behind, a stage where the gods taught music through cruelty, and where silence itself became complicit in his pain. The grove of Marsias fades into shadow as you continue along the path, the faint whistle of wind through flayed skin slowly replaced by the murmur of moving water. You step into a valley where the light glimmers off a wide pool, smooth as glass. At first, it seems peaceful, like the sort of place you'd sit beside to skip stones. But then you notice two figures tangled in the water's embrace. They aren't struggling exactly, but neither are they free. This is Hermaphroditus, son of Hermes and Aphrodite, bound forever to the nymph Samachis. Their bodies fused into one. Hermaphroditus was a beautiful youth, wandering near the fountain of Samachis. The nymph saw him and instantly burned with desire. She begged him to stay, to rest in her pool, to share her life. But he refused, annoyed at her clinging devotion. Still, she didn't relent. When he finally dove into the cool water to bathe, Samachis leapt in after him, wrapping herself around him, pleading with the gods that they would never be parted. And the gods, perhaps amused, perhaps cruel, granted her wish. Their bodies melted together, skin against skin, bone into bone, until one form emerged, neither fully man nor woman, but both. A singular being caught between. You watch now as the fused figure surfaces in the water, their features blurred into strange symmetry. The punishment here isn't agony or chains, its identity itself dissolved. Hermaphroditus had wanted freedom, separation from Samachis, but instead, he carries her within forever. Samachis, who longed for union, now lives inside a form that denies both independence and intimacy. Neither gets what they wanted, yet both are bound for eternity. Historians still argue whether this myth was intended as a cautionary tale about unchecked desire, or whether it reflects the ancient fascination with duality, male and female, mortal and divine, freedom and captivity. Some scholars interpret it as punishment for arrogance, others as an uneasy attempt to explain intersex identity in mythic terms. One mainstream fact, the story of Hermaphroditus, gave us the word hermaphrodite, used for centuries in biology and culture to describe dual-sexed beings. Though outdated and insensitive today, the myth's linguistic echo still lingers in science and everyday speech. And a quirky tidbit, some later Roman poets joked that drinking from Samachis' fountain would soften a man's masculinity, making him passive or delicate. It became a kind of ancient urban legend, like warning someone not to swim in a certain lake or they'd never be the same again. Imagine a bunch of toga-clad travelers steering very wide around that fountain, just in case. The water in the pool ripples now, and you catch glimpses of Hermaphroditus' face, youthful and striking, yet oddly unsettling. Samachis' eyes flash from within, her lips curved in a half-smile, while his expression looks weary, almost resentful. To beings at once, their voices overlapping when they speak, one pleading, the other sighing. The sound chills you more than chains or screams ever could. You step back from the water, the surface gleaming like a mirror. For a moment, you see your own reflection ripple, distorted, as if the pool is toying with your shape too. You shake it off, heart quickening. Behind you, the valley quiets again, except for the gentle lap of water against stone, an eternal reminder that sometimes the gods punish not by breaking you apart, but by fusing you into something you never asked to be. The valley of Samachus and Hermaphroditus fades behind you, the soft ripple of water replaced by the dull clink of coins. You follow the sound until you arrive at a small courtyard littered with treasures, cups, chains, gilded bowls, all gleaming faintly in the half-light. At the center sits a man in regal robes, his face proud but anxious. Every time he touches something, it glows yellow, hardening instantly into gold. At first, the sight dazzles you like watching a magician at work. But then you notice his trembling hands, his empty plate, his hollow eyes. This is King Midas, punished not with pain, but with the curse of getting exactly what he wanted. Midas had once been granted a wish by Dionysus, as thanks for showing kindness to the god's companion, Silenus. Without hesitation, Midas asked that everything he touched turn to gold. It sounded brilliant in theory, endless riches, a kingdom paved in shimmering wealth. And at first, it worked like a dream. He touched stones and they gleamed. He brushed branches and they glittered. He laughed, tossing coins into the air like autumn leaves. But you see the punishment soon enough. When Midas tries to eat, his bread hardens between his teeth. Wine freezes into solid metal before he can swallow. Even the soft hand of his daughter, when she runs into his embrace, becomes rigid, her skin hardening into gold under his fingers. The laughter stops. The palace fills not with joy, but with statues cold, beautiful, lifeless. You hear his stomach growl now, a low rumble that echoes louder than any coin's clink. He looks at a plate of figs before him, lifts one with shaking hands, and the moment he touches it, the fruit flashes into metal. His lips tremble. He lowers it again, defeated. The gold piles around him mock his hunger, his thirst, his loneliness. Historians still argue whether this myth was a warning about greed, or a broader meditation on the danger of unchecked desire. Some suggest it reflected real anxieties in wealthy societies, where riches often isolated rulers instead of protecting them. Midas' touch wasn't just about gold, it was about the way blessings can curdle into curses when taken too far. A mainstream fact, the phrase the Midas touch survives to this day. But in modern use it means uncanny success, not tragedy. Few people remember the starving king behind the phrase, sitting alone in a glittering prison of his own making. And a quirky tidbit, some later storytellers claimed Midas even turned insects into gold when they landed on him, which sounds impressive until you imagine trying to sleep with metallic mosquitoes buzzing around your head. Not exactly the luxury lifestyle he had in mind. You watch him now as he clasps his head in his hands. Even his hair has stiffened into thin golden strands, catching the light like a crown he never asked for. The clink of metal follows every movement, his very body betraying him with wealth he can't eat, can't drink, can't love. In some versions, Midas eventually begged Dionysus to reverse the curse, washing in the river Pactolus to cleanse himself. And indeed, the sands of that river were said to glimmer with gold ever after. But here, in this place, his punishment feels permanent. He sits surrounded by treasure more miserable than a pauper, the ultimate warning that what you wish for might arrive in exactly the wrong way. You step back slowly, careful not to brush against the golden vines creeping along the courtyard walls. The clink of coins follows you, but so does the deeper sound, the hollow rumble of a king whose banquet will never feed him, no matter how bright it shines. The echo of clinking coins fades behind you as you walk deeper into the dim passage, your feet brushing against threads that drag lightly across your ankles. At first, you think it's cobwebs spun by chance, but then you step into a chamber glowing faintly silver, and realize the strands are everywhere woven into spirals, ladders, and twisting patterns across the walls and ceiling. At the center of it all, perched delicately, is Arachne again. Or perhaps it's not repetition, but a reminder because punishment doesn't always stay in one story. Her form is smaller now, the size of a spider, yet the same intensity burns in her many eyes. She scuttles along the loom of her own making, legs twitching with tireless energy. The webs she spins are vast, intricate tapestries, each one telling a story. But as you look closer, you realize the scenes woven here are not about gods and heroes, they're about the punished themselves. Prometheus with his eagle, Sisyphus with his boulder, Niobe weeping stone tears. Arachne records their pain, Each thread a frozen story no god can erase. You feel a pang of awe. Even cursed, she's still the weaver of truth. But the punishment lingers. No matter how perfectly she spins, the webs break down. A breeze passes, a drop of moisture forms, and the silk collapses. She scurries to repair it, frantic, compelled to keep weaving though she knows the pattern will never last. Its futility and brilliance woven together, looping forever. Historians still argue whether the retelling of Arachne's myth was meant to emphasize her artistry, how her skill outlived Athena's wrath, or whether it was simply to double down on the lesson of humility. Why mention her twice unless the Greeks wanted to make sure no one forgot the price of rivaling a goddess? One mainstream fact: spider webs were admired in antiquity for their strength, relative to their delicacy. Aristotle himself wrote about them, noting how fine strands could still capture prey many times the spider's size. It's almost as if nature itself vindicated Arachne's skill. And the quirky tidbit? In some folk traditions centuries later, people believed spiders inherited not only her weaving but her stubbornness. Killing one was considered unlucky, as if you just snapped the thread of a story meant to be told. Even today, some households let spiders linger in corners for good luck, their webs shimmering like ghostly tapestries. Arachne doesn't look at you spiders, rarely do, but you sense her urgency as she spins. Pauses, then spins again. Her legs move so fast they blur, the threads catching starlight in geometric prisms. You watch one scene take shape, Medusa's face in silk, the snake shimmering in faint strands before collapsing in the next draft. Then another, Orpheus turning at the last step, Eurydice dissolving in lace. It's heartbreaking and mesmerizing. A gallery of suffering that never survives long enough to be admired. You crouch for a moment, the threads brushing lightly against your skin. They tickle, soft but insistent, reminding you that her punishment is endless repetition, not unlike Sisyphus or the Danaids. Yet hers feels different. Every web is a protest, a moment of truth the gods can't quite silence. Even if it unravels, even if no one sees, she still weaves. The chamber grows thicker with silk, and you decide to step back before you become part of her tapestry. As you leave, a strand clings stubbornly to your sleeve, glinting before it snaps. Arachne scurries on, spinning her stories into the dark, threads of defiance strung across eternity. The last glimmer of Arachne's silver threads fades from your sleeve as you move forward, brushing away the phantom tickle of silk. The passage darkens, then opens into a moonlit grove where the air feels heavy, almost watchful. At the far edge, you spot a figure stumbling on all fours, her once graceful body covered in coarse fur. Her face is still human enough for you to see her wide, frightened eyes, but her limbs jerk with the gait of an animal. This is Callisto, once a companion of Artemis, now cursed to live as a bear. Callisto had been one of Artemis' loyal hunters, swift with the bow, chased by vow. But Zeus noticed her beauty, and as so often in these myths decided he had the right to take her. Whether by disguise or force, he left her carrying a child. When Artemis discovered the pregnancy, her fury knew no bounds. In some versions, she banished Callisto from the band of hunters. In others, Hera, jealous of Zeus' wandering, transformed the girl herself into a bear. Either way, Callisto's punishment was not just shame, but the loss of her very form. You watch as she lumbers forward, claws digging into the dirt. Her mouth opens, but no words come, only a low growl that startles even herself. She glances toward the shadows, always alert, always hunted. The cruelty of the gods here isn't a quick strike of lightning or a chain of iron. It's the stripping away of identity, forcing her to live half a life in fear, caught between human memory and animal instinct. Historians still argue whether the myth reflects patriarchal anxiety about female purity, or whether it's a story about betrayal within sacred circles. Some see Callisto's bare form as symbolic of exile, cast out from society, marked forever by what was done to her. Others interpret it as a mythic explanation for constellations, since her story doesn't end here. A mainstream fact, later, Zeus placed Callisto in the sky as Ursa Major, the great bear. Her son, Arcas, nearly killed her during a hunt. Not recognizing his mother, but Zeus intervened. lifting both into the heavens as constellations. Even punishment, it seems, could be polished into starlight. And a quirky tidbit? In some Roman versions, Hera still furious asked Oceanus and Tethys never to let Callisto's constellation dip below the horizon. That's why Ursa Major never sets, always circling the pole, forever wandering the night sky without rest. Imagine being punished so thoroughly that not even the stars give you a break. Callisto notices you now, her nostrils flaring, her growl rumbling low. For a moment, you see the terror behind her eyes, the memory of who she was, colliding with the body she's trapped in. She turns sharply, retreating into the brush, her fur catching silver light as she disappears. The grove feels emptier for it, though the weight of her punishment lingers. A reminder that sometimes the gods don't chain you, they remake you, and leave you lost in your own skin. Above, the stars shimmer faintly. You can almost trace the outline of the great bear, its body sprawled across the heavens. Eternal and restless, you step onward, the night air cool on your skin, knowing Callisto will pace both earth and sky forever, caught in punishment that became legend. The grove of Callisto fades behind you, a heavy growl swallowed by the night air. The path winds upward until you step into a clearing where the trees bend back, leaving an open stretch of sky. The air feels tense, charged with motion, and then you see them, a girl sprinting barefoot through the grass, her breath sharp, her hair flying, her arms outstretched as though she might take flight. Behind her, Apollo's twin sister, Artemis, is nowhere to be seen, but Apollo himself isn't the hunter tonight. Instead, it's his cousin, radiant and desperate. This is Daphne, fleeing from Apollo's pursuit, her punishment unfolding in the cruelest metamorphosis. It began when Apollo mocked Eros, the little god of love, claiming his arrows were nothing compared to his own strength with a bow. Eros, stung by the insult, fired 2 arrows in retaliation, one tipped with gold, to make Apollo fall hopelessly in love, and one tipped with lead to make Daphne despise him. The result was a chase that would echo forever, Apollo burning with passion, Daphne fleeing with terror. You watch it now, the frantic rhythm of her steps, the pounding of his pursuit. He calls her name, promising tenderness, begging her to stop, but his words tangle in the air, cloying instead of comforting. Daphne doesn't slow. She runs harder, the branches tearing at her arms, the ground cutting her feet. Her breath is ragged, her eyes wide with panic, and you can feel her pulse thudding in your own chest. Historians still argue whether this story is meant as a lesson about the dangers of unchecked desire, or whether it's a grim acknowledgement that even gods can't force love without destroying it. Some modern scholars even see it as one of the earliest cautionary tales about harassment, told through myth and transformation. One mainstream fact: Daphne's name means laurel, and this chase explains why the laurel tree became sacred to Apollo. After her transformation, he wore laurel wreaths as symbols of both victory and memory, ironic trophies of a love he never won. And a quirky tidbit: in some later versions, Apollo promised that since she could not be his lover, she would at least share his glory. Laurel crowns became the prize for victors in athletic and poetic contests, meaning every Olympian crowned with leaves carried a fragment of Daphne's body on their head. Ancient product placement in the strangest way possible. You see the moment her strength fails. Apollo's hand is just behind her, fingers outstretched to clutch her wrist. Daphne cries out, not to him, but to her father, the river god Peneus. Her prayer is desperate: destroy my beauty, take my form, anything to save me. And the ground shudders in response. Her toes root into the earth, her skin hardens, her hair fans into a crown of leaves. Apollo stumbles forward, clutching her bark-rough arm. He presses his cheek against the trunk, whispering her name, but she no longer answers. You look at the tree, its leaves shivering gently as if in relief. Her form is there, her fingers frozen as twigs, her face stretched into the lines of bark, her body now hidden in roots and branches. She escaped him, but the cost was herself. The punishment wasn't just Apollo's, losing the love he wanted. It was hers, losing the body and freedom she had fought to protect. The clearing is quiet now, save for the rustle of laurel leaves in the breeze. Apollo stands motionless, sorrow heavy in his eyes. He plucks a branch, weaves it into a crown, and promises her memory will live on through every poet, every athlete, every song. But to you, watching in the half-light, it feels hollow. The leaves tremble as though whispering that freedom taken is never truly restored. Even when reshaped into glory, you step back, the path darkening again, the laurel tree's shadow stretching long. Behind you, Apollo bows his head, pressing the wreath to his brow, a reminder that even gods wear the weight of punishment when love turns to pursuit, and choice becomes roots. The rustle of laurel leaves still whispers in your ears as you step away from the clearing. The path bends toward a stony ridge where the air feels sharper, tinged with a strange mix of incense and smoke. There, seated between two opposing forces, one light, one shadow, stands Tyasius, the prophet who carried not one punishment, but two. His body seems frail, his eyes blank, yet his presence commands the space. You realize at once, this is the man who lived blind because of a quarrel between gods. The story begins long before the blindness. Tyasius once wandered the slopes of Mount Serene and stumbled upon two snakes entwined in mating. Striking at them with his staff, he was transformed into a woman, his body shifting instantly, his life rewoven without his consent. For 7 years, Tyasius lived as female, even marrying and bearing children in some versions. Then, one day, he found the same pair of snakes and struck them again. His body returned to its male form, restoring what was taken, yet leaving him marked forever by both experiences. It was this duality that doomed him. Zeus and Hera, the eternal bickering couple, once argued over who experienced more pleasure in love, men or women. Unable to resolve it, they called Tyasius the only mortal who had lived both lives. Hesitant but honest, he answered, "Women enjoy it more." Zeus laughed triumphantly, but Hera, humiliated, struck Tyasius blind on the spot. You look into his blank eyes now, clouded and pale. His punishment was the loss of sight, not because he lied, but because he told an uncomfortable truth. Zeus, feeling guilty, granted him something in return, the gift of prophecy. Sightless in body, Tyasius could see farther into time than anyone else. Historians still argue whether the myth reflects anxieties about gender roles, or whether it was a way of granting divine authority to an otherwise mortal seer. Some suggest his blindness symbolizes the cost of knowledge. That truth often comes at the expense of personal freedom. One mainstream fact, Tyasius appears in numerous Greek works, from Homer's Odyssey to Sophocles' Oedipus Rex *. Each time, his presence carries weight, the blind prophet who always knows the truth, even when no one wants to hear it. And a quirky tidbit, in some fringe tales, Hera's punishment was not instantaneous. Instead, she cursed Tyasius to lose his sight gradually, day by day, so that he would feel the weight of fading vision like a slow eclipse. Imagine living with the dread of watching the world dim, knowing each sunrise would be a little darker than the last. You watch him now as he tilts his head, as though hearing you approach. He doesn't turn his eyes, he doesn't need to. His voice is calm, resonant, carrying the weight of inevitability. The gods punish, he murmurs, but they also reveal. Which do you fear more? His words linger in the air, a riddle without answer. You feel the wind shift around him, tugging at his robes. He doesn't move, rooted in place like a monument to paradox, blinded yet all-seeing, punished yet empowered. The silence stretches heavy with his presence until you step back, leaving him on the ridge, his clouded eyes fixed on futures only he can see. The wind from Tyasius Ridge follows you down a narrow path, cool and sharp, like a warning carried on the air. The ground here feels uneasy beneath your feet, as though it remembers something violent. Soon you reach a clearing where the smell of blood and ash lingers faintly. A figure stands there, gaunt, his eyes wild, his hands twitching with hunger. His teeth gleam when he snarls, and his tongue lolls with unnatural thirst. This is Lycaon, once a king, now cursed to live as the very beast he mocked the gods with. Lycaon ruled Arcadia, and though he was wealthy, he grew arrogant, even cruel. When Zeus descended in disguise to test mortal hospitality, Lycaon thought he could outwit the visitor. He served the god a meal spiced with horror, a dish of human flesh, sometimes said to be his own son's. He wanted to see if Zeus would notice, if the god was truly all-seeing. Spoiler alert, Zeus noticed. Gods always noticed. The punishment came swift and savage. Zeus overturned the table, thunder splitting the hall, and transformed Lycaon into a wolf. His teeth lengthened, his claws sharpened, his hunger twisted until it craved flesh and blood. From that day forward, he prowled the mountains, driven by hunger he could never satisfy. You see him now pacing the clearing, his body half human, half wolf, caught in the moment of change. His fingers curl into claws, his back hunches, his jaw juts forward in a snarl. His eyes gleam with hunger, but not for bread or wine, only for the taste of what he once mocked the gods with. The punishment isn't death. It's appetite sharpened into torture, a craving that devours him from within. Historians still argue whether this myth was a warning against sacrilege, or whether it hints at ancient rituals of human sacrifice in early Greek religion. Some scholars suggest the story of Lycaon is a mythologized memory of cult practices, where humans were offered to Zeus Lycaios, the wolf Zeus. The punishment, then, became a story to explain and condemn those darker rites. One mainstream fact, the word lycanthropy, meaning werewolf transformation, comes directly from Lycaon's name. Every modern horror story about moonlit transformations echoes back to this ancient king, who mocked Zeus with a cannibal feast. And a quirky tidbit. In one fringe version, Zeus didn't just transform Lycaon, but cursed all his sons as well. Dozens of princes prowled Arcadia as wolves, a whole dynasty of beasts roaming the hills. Imagine going to a family reunion where everyone growls at the moon and fights over raw steaks. You watch as Lycaon growls low, circling the clearing, his nostrils flaring at your scent. For a heartbeat, you think he might leap at you, jaws snapping. But instead he throws back his head and howls, a sound that cracks the silence open. It's not triumph, not even anger, just hunger, raw and endless. The trees shiver with the sound, the earth itself recoiling. He stumbles forward on half-formed paws, claws scraping the dirt. His punishment isn't just to be a wolf, it's to be neither fully wolf nor man. Trapped in the agony of becoming forever. You feel his eyes on you, sharp and accusing, as though daring you to sit at his cursed banquet. But you take a step back and another, until the shadows swallow him and his howl fades into the night. Behind you, the path stretches onward, quieter now, but the memory of that hunger lingers. The god's justice doesn't always chain you, it can twist your very nature, leaving you trapped in a body that devours itself. The echoes of Lycaon's howl still vibrate in your chest as you walk on, the path sloping upward until the air grows thinner and colder. Then you see him, a towering figure hunched beneath an impossible weight. His shoulders bulge, his arms tremble, his knees grind against the rock. Yet he does not collapse. The dome of the sky itself rests across his back, studded with stars that shimmer faintly. This is Atlas, the titan condemned to carry the heavens forever, punished for siding with the wrong side in the cosmic war. Atlas had once fought alongside the titans against Zeus and the Olympians. It was a war of giants, of mountains hurled like pebbles, of lightning against stone. When the titans fell, most were chained in Tartarus. But Atlas received a unique sentence. He was ordered to hold up the sky, at the western edge of the world, separating earth from the heavens, keeping chaos at bay through sheer endurance. His punishment was not pain alone, it was responsibility so crushing that it erased every other part of his existence. You step closer, craning your neck. The weight he bears isn't metaphorical, it's real. You can see the stars trembling, the constellations dragging faint arcs as his muscles shift. His arms quiver, sweat dripping like meteors from his brow. Every breath rattles like an earthquake. Yet the dome never falls. He cannot let it. Historians still argue whether Atlas' punishment was meant as pure cruelty or as a mythic explanation for the structure of the cosmos. Was it punishment, or was it necessity? Someone had to hold up the sky, after all. Perhaps the gods decided Atlas, with his broad shoulders and rebellious spirit, was the perfect candidate. One mainstream fact, the image of Atlas holding the globe became so enduring that it eventually lent his name to collections of maps *****. It's a delicious irony. A being crushed under the world became the symbol for organizing it neatly on paper. And a quirky tidbit? In some fringe traditions, Atlas wasn't just standing still. He was said to shift his stance from time to time, adjusting the heavens on his back. When he did, mortals felt earthquakes. Imagine blaming tectonic plates for what was really just a tired titan stretching his shoulders. You watch Atlas now as he grits his teeth, his neck cord straining. For a moment, he glances downward, his eyes catching yours. They burn with fury and exhaustion, but also a strange defiance. He won't break, because breaking would mean the end of everything above. His punishment is unbearable, but it also keeps the universe intact. At his feet, you notice scorched marks where Heracles once stood. In one myth, the hero tricked Atlas into retrieving the golden apples, briefly freeing the Titan from his load. But when Atlas tried to leave Heracles with the burden, the trickster hero outwitted him, returning the sky to its rightful bearer. The scars on the ground feel like faint signatures of that moment. Proof that even brief relief was a trap. You step back slowly, the air pressing heavy on your own shoulders as though Atlas' burden weighs on you too. He shifts slightly, the stars dragging across the dome, and for a heartbeat you fear the sky might slip. But no, he steadies, jaw clenched, arms locked, doomed to balance the cosmos until time itself runs dry. You leave Atlas behind, his groans fading into the rustle of constellations overhead. The air lightens as you descend into a small glade where the mood shifts, less tragic, more mocking, like the gods decided humiliation was punishment enough. At the center of the clearing stands a strange figure, shaggy legs, goat hooves, a wild grin frozen on his face. It's Pan, the rustic god of shepherds, pipes slung carelessly around his neck. But here, instead of revelry, you sense the sting of ridicule clinging to him. His punishment wasn't chains or fire, it was laughter ringing down the centuries. It began with music. Pan, proud of his reed pipes, once dared to claim he could play more beautifully than Apollo himself. And as with Marsyas, Apollo accepted the challenge. The contest took place before a panel of judges, including Tmolus, a mountain spirit, and King Midas. Apollo strummed his lyre, flawless and divine, while Pan piped a rustic tune wild, raw, but charming in its own way. Tmolus declared Apollo the victor without hesitation, but Midas, enchanted by Pan's melody, disagreed. He said Pan should win. Apollo didn't take criticism lightly. Furious at Midas, he cursed the king with donkey ears, marking him forever as foolish. But Pan, too, bore punishment, not flayed like Marsyas, but branded as laughable. From then on, his music carried the reputation of being second-rate, the butt of cosmic jokes. Mortals worshipped him for his wildness, sure, but Olympians never let him forget that he lost. You hear it now in the glade, the faint echo of chuckling voices, as though the laughter of gods still haunts the air. Pan plays his pipes a quick, playful tune, but each note seems to wobble under the weight of mockery. He winces slightly, though his grin never fades. His punishment isn't agony, it's ridicule baked into every performance. Every song reminding the world he wasn't good enough for the divine stage. Historians still argue whether this myth was meant as a moral about overreaching, or simply a story to reinforce Apollo's supremacy. Some even suggest it shows the divide between rustic, rural culture and polished, urban artistry. Pan's pipes might charm shepherds, but Apollo's lyre belonged in temples. The punishment, then, wasn't just about music, it was about class and culture. One mainstream fact, the word panic comes from Pan's name, because his sudden appearances in wild places were said to inspire irrational fear. The god mocked for his music was still feared for his presence, a strange mix of comedy and dread. And the quirky tidbit? In some folk tales, Pan leaned into the ridicule, using his donkey laugh hee-haw. Bray liked to startle travelers. He turned mockery into mischief, proving that even humiliation could become a tool of power if you were clever enough. You watch him now, pipes at his lips, hooves tapping as the tune stumbles and soars. The laughter echoes faintly again, but Pan shrugs it off, blowing harder, letting the reeds squeal. His punishment is perpetual second place, eternal mockery, but he wears it like a badge, still. As you step away, you catch one quick flicker in his eyes, a shadow behind the grin. It's the look of someone who knows that no matter how loudly he plays, the god's laughter will always be louder. The glade echoes with his tune, part cheerful, part bitter, as though punishment can sometimes sound like a song you never stop playing. The mocking echoes of Pan's pipes fade as you tread onward, the glade narrowing into a jagged stone corridor. The air grows metallic, tinged with the smell of smoke and iron. Sparks flicker faintly in the dark, like embers trying to remember they were once fire. And then you see him limping, shoulders hunched, his face scarred by old burns. This is Hephaestus, the divine smith, god of fire and craftsmanship, but also the butt of the cruelest jokes among the Olympians. His punishment wasn't eternal torment in chains. It was humiliation, repeated again and again, by his own family. Hephaestus was born of Hera alone, fashioned without Zeus. Some say she wanted to prove she didn't need her husband to create life. But when she saw the child crippled, imperfect, she cast him out of Olympus. Ashamed of his twisted legs, he tumbled down from the heavens, falling for an entire day before crashing into the sea. There, nymphs raised him in secret, and he taught himself the art of fire and forge. His hands, though scarred, became the most skilled in all creation. You watch him now at his anvil, sparks leaping with every strike. He forges weapons, jewelry, thrones, even chains strong enough to hold gods. Yet despite his genius, Olympus never treated him kindly. Zeus mocked him, Hera shamed him, and even his wife, Aphrodite, betrayed him with ours. The god of war! His forge glows with brilliance, but his heart carries the weight of mockery. Historians still argue whether Hephaestus' tale was meant to show that skill can redeem imperfection, or whether it reflects ancient discomfort with disability. Was he a symbol of resilience, or an object lesson about flaws? The debate lingers like the smoke of his forge. One mainstream fact: Hephaestus was credited with crafting some of the greatest divine artifacts, the armor of Achilles, Hermes' winged sandals, even the chains that bound Prometheus. Without him, the Olympians would lack their sharpest tools. The very gods who mocked him relied on his work. And a quirky tidbit: in some versions, Hephaestus got his revenge through humor. When he discovered Aphrodite and Ars together, he forged a net of unbreakable chains and dropped it over them mid-embrace. Then he invited the other gods to laugh at the trapped lovers, flipping the script of humiliation. Imagine the divine equivalent of pulling the fire alarm at prom night, except with a lot more giggling immortals. You watch as Hephaestus hammers a glowing ingot, his limp making each movement slightly uneven, yet powerful. The sparks leap high, dancing around his forge like tiny spirits. His punishment is written not in chains, but in the way others see him, a god who should have been honored, yet instead endured ridicule, exile and betrayal. Still, there's pride here. Every clang of his hammer says, "I am more than what you see." The flames lick upward, bathing him in red light, and for a moment you feel the heat of his stubborn resilience. His limp doesn't slow the rhythm, it shapes it. His scars don't define him, they fuel him. As you step back, the forge light fades into the dark, but the echo of his hammer follows you. The gods punished Hephaestus with humiliation, but in every spark, in every blade, he turns that punishment into proof. He was the outcast who built Olympus itself, and that irony, perhaps, is sharper than any chain. The clang of Hephaestus' hammer fades behind you, replaced by the softer trickle of water over stone. You follow the sound until you arrive at a pool so still it feels like glass, framed by reeds that whisper in the breeze. At its edge kneels a boy, beautiful beyond reason, his features glowing faintly in the dim light. He leans forward, gazing into the water as though it holds the entire universe. This is Narcissus, punished not with pain or transformation at first, but with a love so impossible it devoured him from within. Narcissus had been admired everywhere he went. Men and women alike fell at his feet, drawn by his beauty. But he was proud, even cruel, spurning every admirer with disdain. Among those he scorned was Echo, the nymph whose voice you remember trailing you in earlier chambers. She whispered her love, but he dismissed her, leaving her to fade into nothing. The guards, angered by his arrogance, decided to make him feel what he had inflicted, unrequited love. You watch as he bends closer to the pool, his lips parting in awe. He sees his reflection and mistakes it for another figure perfect, delicate, staring back with equal longing. He reaches out, fingertips grazing the water, but the image shatters with each ripple. Still, he cannot look away. He sighs, whispers words of devotion, only to hear them swallowed by the silence. Hunger grips him, but he refuses to eat. Sleep tugs at him, but he will not close his eyes. He is consumed by the one love that can never answer. Historians still argue whether this myth was meant as a warning about vanity, or whether it's a deeper metaphor for the danger of obsession, how desire can turn inward, until nothing remains. Some even suggest it reflects the peril of confusing image for reality, a theme that feels strangely modern. One mainstream fact: the very word narcissism comes from his name, used today to describe self-obsession and vanity. Psychology, centuries later, still leans on this myth to explain the dangers of loving the mirror more than the world. And the quirky tidbit? In certain versions, when Narcissus finally perished by the pool, either wasting away or falling into the water, his body vanished. In its place bloomed the narcissus flower, delicate and pale, bending forever toward its own reflection in streams and ponds. Even in death, he could not look away. You lean closer, careful not to let your shadow cross the pool. Narcissus' eyes are wide, his breath shallow, his lips trembling as though ready to kiss the water's surface. He whispers, "Stay with me," and though you know it's only his reflection, the words sting with longing. His punishment is not physical agony. It is desire sharpened into despair, a hunger that feeds on itself until nothing else matters. As you step back, the reeds sway gently, and the pool ripples once, breaking his face into shards. He gasps and leans closer, desperate to piece it back together. You leave him there, locked in love with the unreachable, his eternity sealed in a reflection that vanishes the moment he touches it.